Hello, and welcome to part 2 of our series about Lionel Johnson. I am Zeckthar, and today we will be discussing the Imperium Secundus. I know those of you who have an understanding of Warhammer's history are asking,
But Zeckthar, wasn't Roboute Gulliman the author of the Imperium Secundus?
well, the short answer is yes. But that doesn't mean that the Lion or the Angel were not part of it, or the fall of the Second Empire. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start back at the beginning, shall we?
The Imperium Secundus, also known as the Unremembered Empire, was the second stellar empire of humanity created by the Ultramarines Primarch Roboute Gulliman in 009.M31 during the Horus Heresy following the horrific events of the Battle of Kolth and the drop site massacre of Estevan V. Thanks to the Rune Storm, the eastern part of the Empire of Man was completely cut off from the rest of humanity, and Gulliman knew that some sort of order had to be restored. Not only that, but due to the destruction of the Rune Storm and the calamity of the Kolth atrocity, he could not honestly say that the eastern side of the Empire was all that was left of humanity. To restore order, he did two things. One, he established a second empire. Therefore, people could still count on law and order instead of falling into their baser instincts. You know, the looting and destroying bit that plagues humanity when there is no rule of law. Anarchy. Two, he set up a means to help navigate their void ships through the warp without the beacon of the Astronomicon, through the use of recently discovered Xenos technology on the world of Sotha, known as the Pharos. What he didn't realize was the Pharos served another purpose. It also was a beacon that transmitted through space in the warp. It became a calling card for not one legion of Space Marines, but two. Now, before the first shows up with their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, I must point out a couple of things about this new empire. Starting with the most important. Roboute Gulliman did not want to be emperor. He built the Imperium Secundus out of a desperate necessity and refused to be called emperor, simply being known as regent. He had a problem with being emperor on a couple of fronts. One, he truly didn't think his father was dead, and to betray the man that had given him his purpose brought him to despair. He also had been recorded to say that he thought that he could either rule the empire or command its forces, but not both. And lastly, he was afraid that his Ultramarines would think that he was trying to take over, much like Horus the Betrayer was doing at the time. Now, I'm thinking out loud here. We all know he could definitely rule the Empire and command the troops. But that last bit I really think shows where Gulliman's thoughts were. I think Roboute was smart enough to realize that if he declared himself emperor too soon, it would spark all sorts of revolts, not just within the populace, but within his own troops as well. What he really needed was a figurehead. Someone who he could rule through. And at first, when he heard a friendly Primarch had entered his space, he thought he'd found it. Unfortunately, that Primarch happened to be Lionel Johnson. Gulliman was overjoyed that one of his wayward brothers had arrived during the hour of need. But of all his brothers, he wondered why it had to be the Lion who had found his way through the storm. Though the Primarch of the Ultramarines greatly admired the Lord of the First Legion, he felt there had always been a shadow upon him. The Lion dwelled in secrets, and played his cards too close, for he walked by himself when he pleased. There was too much of the wild forest in him. The Lion should have been as noble as any of Gilliman's brother Primarchs, but they had never been close, and there was too much about him that was sly. Yet, despite his personal misgivings, Gulliman welcomed the Lion with all the formality and respect due his prestigious position. Roboute Gulliman offered his brother an honor guard of almost 47,000 fighting souls, not to mention the million or more civilians crowded into the streets of Macragge for a glimpse of the Lion Lord and his famous warriors. The people of Macragge came out in force to celebrate the arrival of the Lion. After the grand parade, the brothers retired to a private chamber to discuss what to do. Yet more importantly, Roboute was going to give the Lion his sales pitch of the new empire. Gulliman revealed his plans to the Lion for his continuity of the Imperium, that it must endure in one form or another. Roboute then explained to his brother that he was already in the process of establishing a second Imperium upon the corpse of the first. Gulliman did not pretend to hide his motives, but he made clear that he was only establishing such an empire in order to keep the flame of their father's dream alive. This was not about empire building, or seeking to claim the throne for himself, as Horus had done. The Avenging Son already had a stellar empire in his possession, Ultramar, the 500 worlds. Gulliman wanted his brother to know that his only intention was to ensure the survival of his father's dream, Terra might have fallen, and their father might already be dead. Whatever the reality of the situation they faced, the rune storm prevented them from knowing the truth. He needed the Lion to understand that he was not Horus. Gilliman explained to his brother that the difference between himself and Horus was that he did not want to be the new emperor. The Lord Macrogh proposed that the Lion take up this mantle as the new regent of the Imperium Secundus rather than himself. While Lionel Johnson had always wanted the position of War Master, the thought of ruling a galactic empire had always seemed distasteful. The Lion knew his purpose in the universe: to destroy the Empire's enemies, grind them into dust. He was a warrior, not a statesman. The Lion balked at the idea of becoming regent, and no matter how Roboute pried him, the Lion refused. While given enough time, the Lord of the Ultramarines might have been able to sway him, but it did not matter, because their other brother, the Angel Sanguinious, had arrived. A far better pick, Roboute was able to convince the Lord of the Blood Angels to take the role as Emperor, while Gulliman himself chose the title of Lord Warden, and the title of Lord Protector was bequeathed to Lionel Johnson. I must state here that there is some eerie similarities to the Roman triumvirate of Terran 42. Not the first one, which is remembered more with Pompey Magnus, Julius Caesar, and Marcus Crassus, but the second one, with Gaius Octavius, Mark Antony, and Marcus Lepidus. Roboute Gulliman as the part of Octavius, a master statesman and empire builder, his brother the Lion, a warrior much like Mark Antony, and Sanguinious, the poor fellow stuck in the middle, as Lepidus. Who knows what would have happened if the Imperium Secundus had lasted longer? Perhaps it would have split in two, with the Lion on one side and Gulliman on the other, like it did in Rome. Personally, I think that wouldn't happen, for a couple of reasons. While I did say that the relationship of these three was similar to the second triumvirate, their strengths resembled the first. While many remember Pompey and Caesar, most forget how powerful Crassus actually was. He wasn't a third wheel. Far from it. He held the balance, much like a third leg on a footstool. Because of this, the Roman Republic thrived under the leadership of these three men, and it wasn't until Crassus died that it all went down the drain. In the same way, I think Sanguinius would have kept the peace, and their empire would have flourished under their rule. Yet some at the time would disagree. Back on Terra, Malcador the Sigillite had suspected that Gulliman might try to build his own empire if cut off from the throne world, and the region of Terra was nervous that the Primarch might attempt to usurp the Emperor's power. Malcador even hoped that the Dark Angels would stop Gulliman if he tried to secede in any way that was similar to what Horus had done. He never knew that the Lion's forces had joined with Gulliman in support of the Imperium Secundus project. But this is all conjecture. The Empire only lasted 5 years. Once the three figures figured out that the Emperor was in fact still alive, they dissolved the Imperium Secundus, mustered their forces, and forced their way through the runestone. Yet even before this, the Imperium was already starting to falter, thanks to our old friend, Konrad Curze. You see, he had escaped the invincible reason, and was back to his old tricks, causing havoc on Macrogh. Eventually, both Gulliman and the Lion confronted and cornered Curze. Their attempts to kill him were unsuccessful, as the Night Lord's Primarch had laid a cunning trap. He brought down an entire chapel upon the two Primarchs through the use of planted explosives, and fled the scene. Gulliman and the Lion were only saved through the direct intervention of a loyalist Iron Warrior's warsmith, Barabbas d'Antioch, who was communicating with Gulliman at the time of the attack through a portal that was opened by the Pharaohs. On instinct, the warsmith reached through the portal and pulled the two Primarchs to safety on Sotha. Feeling directly responsible for the Night Hunter's rampage on Macrogh, the Lion continued to obsessively hunt his wayward former brother for the next 2 Terran years. No matter how close he came, Konrad, much like on the Invincible Reason, always seemed to be just out of reach. While continuing his obsessive hunt for the elusive Night Haunter, the Lion and Gulliman continuously clashed over policy, especially in regards to the security of the Imperium Secundus. They were particularly vexed with how best to deal with the emergence of rebels on Macrogh that the Lion was certain Curze had instigated. Following a suicide bombing on the Astartes convoy, the Lion used the First Legion to establish martial law on Macrogh. Certain that Curze was hiding within the rebellious Illyrium region, the Lion advocated the use of massive orbital saturation bombardment of the region to ensure Curze's death. Facing the resistance from both the Emperor Sanguinious and Gulliman, the Lion instead opted to deploy his legion's Dreadwing in order to flush out Curze and the rebels. During an attack on the city of Alma Mons, The Lion finally cornered the elusive Night Lord's Primarch, and the two came to blows. After a brutal confrontation, the Lion eventually emerged victorious, and questioned his brother why he had turned away from the Emperor, to which Kurz simply replied, "Why not?" Kurz went on to explain that there was a monster in his head that he could not stop. Though he finally had Kurz at his mercy, the Lion couldn't bring himself to kill his brother. Much like Leman Russ could not bring himself to kill Horus with the Spear of Russ. But you fine folks knew that already, because you listened to my Vox, the Spear of Russ, right? Yet Conrad was no Horus, and even though he could not kill his brother, he made sure that Conrad could cause no more harm. He ripped off Kurz's backpack from his battle plate, lifted him high over his head, and brutally brought the Night Haunter down across his knee, breaking Kurz's spine and paralyzing him. The Lion then dragged the broken Conrad Kurz before Sanguinious and Gulliman to stand trial. A triumvirate was later held where Kurz defended his actions but refused to admit his guilt. Since each of the Primarchs had been created to perform a specific function, Kurz argued he was merely acting according to his own nature and therefore had committed no crimes. The Night Lord's Primarch further divided Gulliman and the Lion by accusing the latter of secretly ordering orbital bombardments in direct violation of Gilliman's orders to prevent civilian casualties. Enraged, the Lion sought to kill Kurz, but was halted by the words of Sanguinious, as Gilliman snatched Lionel Johnson's sword and broke the blade across his armored thigh in his fury. Well, Johnson was beyond angry, but Sanguinious dismissed the Lord Protector, ending the triumvirate. The Lion was then banished from the Imperium Secundus. Taking his leave, the Dark Angels withdrew from Macragge only hours later. Standing in the chamber of the Tukulka engine, aboard the Invincible Reason, the Lion brooded over recent events. He questioned his actions over the course of the last few decades, the banishment of Luther, the death of Namil, as well as other decisions he had come to regret. As the Dark Angel made his final preparations to depart back to Caliban, the Lion went back to the Tukulka engine chamber. He ordered the device to teleport himself and Holgan Deathbringer, the voted lieutenant of the Deathwing, back to Macragge. As Sanguinious prepared to execute Kurz for his crimes, both the Lion and his lieutenant teleported directly into the chamber and told Sanguinious to stop. As troops entered the room demanding the Lion's surrender, L. Johnson explained his reasons for the intrusion. He reasoned that Kurz had the ability to see precognitive visions and potential futures, and repeated the Night Haunter's claim that his death would one day come at the hands of an assassin sent by the Emperor. If this was true, the Lion reasoned, then it was proof that the Emperor was still very much alive beyond the bearer of the Runestorm. Sanguinious knew the Lion's explanation rang true, as he recognized that his own precognitive vision of his inevitable death would also eventually come to pass. When Gilliman demanded to know what would become of Kurz, the Lion knelt before his two brothers and promised that he would be Kurz's jailer. Kurz were made captive aboard the Invincible Reason, and occasionally the Lion would speak with him in an attempt to gather information from his prophetic visions. But the Night Haunter rarely proved cooperative. In the wake of these revelations, the Imperium Secundus was dissolved by the three Primarchs, as an unfortunate mistake. The three brothers then led their legions in an attempt to breach the Runestorm and reach Terra to defend the Emperor now that they knew he was still alive. As I said before, this truly dissolved the Imperium Secundus, and the three Primarchs mustered their forces, tried, and eventually succeeded in pushing through the Runestorm, forcing their way to Holy Terra. But that is a story for next week's vlogs, when we discuss the Second Battle of Davin, as well as the Crusade of Vengeance. I hope you liked this short look at the Imperium Secundus, and feel free to like, subscribe, and follow.
Until next time, this is Zeckthar, signing off.